Hey guys, this is Yoda. This will be my weekly tier list update for War Within Beta Mythic Plus. Most recently, we had some massive Warlock nerfs, some Ellie rebuffs, Shadow Priest buffs, not that many tank changes. Also, we started playing at 626 item level. They adjusted the item level in dungeons in beta. Before we were playing at 613, now we're at 626. I think that's 613 is very undergeared. 626 is like heroic, like fully upgraded heroic gear, and then 639 I think is max eye level. So yeah, we're not quite where we could be, but playing at this eye level has made us feel like some differences, especially in tanks. We'll start at the top meta for sure. Og and Mage, they still make the key way easier for healer and tank, so they're just going to be in the meta, no questions asked. For Maybe meta, there's right now Vegas Demon Hunter, I think, is the only tank that's like standing up above the others, and that's only because of damage. First of all, they have Chaos Brand, and most of the damage dealt in High Mythic Plus is magical. And they also do the highest personal damage. I think right now it's mainly because Burning Blades got like accidentally tuned wrong. I don't want to say it's a bug because like they actually wrote those in the patch notes that it's buffed by 300%, but surely that was a mistake and it'll get changed. Right now, Burning Blades is probably about 20% of your damage on single target, and I think that's just way too high for a hero talent, so surely it gets changed. In terms of which tank is the actual tankiest, I don't think VDH is the tankiest, but it's like tanky enough while doing that much damage, which is why I have it up here. For healers, there's been like a lot of healers recently playing Prez Evoker, so I'm going to put it to maybe meta. Previously, the reason I didn't have it here is because it was unpopular, but now suddenly it is popular, so we'll see. I think Shaman is still the best healer, mainly because of the raid buff that it provides, Sky Fury. If you're not playing with another Shaman, Sky Fury is extremely valuable. Especially depending on the spec, it's like more valuable on some than others. But having a raid buff while having like high healing is definitely putting it up there for healers that you want to be selecting for a meta choice. Paladin did get nerfed, but I think it's still pretty strong, probably able to handle most encounters, and you don't have to cast when you're playing Paladin, so I'm going to put it here in maybe meta. Rest of Druid, nothing much has changed. Damage is still nerfed, still provides Mark of the Wild, and still not really as strong healing wise as some of the other healers, but the damage plus raid buff is definitely worth considering. Evoker, as mentioned before, has very high healing throughput and pretty high healer damage. The main weakness is that it doesn't really have a raid buff. Like these three all provide a decent raid buff. Evoker has like Blessing of the Bronze, LOL. And Evoker utility is often going to be doubled because you're going to have an AUG in your key most likely. Somewhat diminishing returns there. And then also your group has to play around your range sometimes. Or like the radius of your skills. Usually having to stand in Dream Breath is not as big of a deal anymore, but you still have shorter range than other healers, so there's something to play around. We will say it's maybe meta though, just because the throughput and damage are so high. For casters, Ellie is back. It got rebuffed mostly on the lightning skills, like Chain Lightning. So now people are playing a Chain Lightning build. So Ellie is looking pretty good again. Shadow Priest got buffed, and the prio damage is crazy, even if the overall is not quite there. So Shadow Priest, I would say, is maybe meta as well, potentially back. AFFLICTION is the new Warlock spec that people are playing. I think the other two got severely nerfed with the most recent patch, and AF is probably the strongest right now. Hard to say what will actually meta out of these three, but most likely it will be a caster just because of Arcane Intellect and Chaos Brand. That said, outside of the very top keys or super organized groups, even in super organized groups, it's very possible to play like just a melee DPS that is a consistent player who never dies and is able to output high damage. I would say you're probably able to do the same level keys, maybe like one level below in some keys, maybe, but yeah. These I would say are like the best users of raid buffs, but tuning wise, melee could potentially be stronger as well. So in the strong tier, we've got the 4 tanks that are not DH or Paladin. I think tank balance is better than it has ever been in Dragonflight. Most of the tanks are in a pretty good spot and relatively close to each other in terms of damage and survivability. They are kind of in this order, I guess, because I think Bear provides a raid buff, so it's pretty good. Then Warrior is like really tanky and hard to get one shot, and then Blood Decay is like somewhat harder to play, and Brew kind of does lower damage, doesn't have utility as much as the other tanks. But yeah, they're all strong. There will be a video, I think, at some point being released going over like what I think about all of the tanks like more in detail. But for now, this is like, they're all good. all roughly same level, and this is the order that I would put them in very arbitrarily. Mistweaver Monk, I have seen some Mistweaver Monk being played on beta. It looks like it can handle most of the events, but the damage is not as high like as a Prez or a Druid, and it doesn't provide as useful a raid buff as Shaman. In terms of DPS, Frost and Unholy Decay are still looking super strong. Notes that are posted on Wowhead about like 15% nerfs are things that already existed on beta. They're not actual nerfs for beta DKs. I think the one change that was noticed is that Icy Death Torrent was reduced beyond 8, and now it's going to be reduced beyond 5, which is not that big of a nerf. It's somewhat of a nerf, but not massive. For Frost Decay is still like very, very high output, relatively good single and AoE, and also extremely tanky. Same with Unholy. I think they're both pretty good. I don't really play Unholy that well, so it's hard for me to gauge it, but I think Unholy and Frost are about the same level. For Rogues, Assassination Rogue has been popping off on the beta. Their damage is extremely high, especially when they're allowed to re-stealth. Single target is not as good, and they still have some classic assassination problems where, like, if there's not a massive priority mob, then they can't really use Caustic Spatter as well. Damage-wise, they're definitely looking very, very good. Havoc is looking okay damage-wise. A lot of other specs got nerfed, where Havoc didn't really get nerfed. In fact, they got a little bit buffed. I'm expecting some more changes to Havoc, mostly because of Burning Blades, like some confusion there with the devs. So we'll see where they end up. But, providing Chaos Brand is very valuable, so we're putting Havoc in the strong category. Fury and Enhance also looking somewhat strong. They definitely can do the damages. They just don't benefit from Arcane Intellect, so that's why they're in this category. Demolock, I think, is still relatively okay. I haven't seen that many people playing it, and it got somewhat nerfed in the most recent patch. Not as nerfed as Destro, but it caught some nerfs. Moonkin is, a range spec with a raid buff, so it's always on the radar. Damage-wise, I think, is not as good as some of the other specs right now, especially single target. It's not that good, so we're putting it in the strong category. For mid, we've got Prot Pally. Kind of feels like Pally is just the weakest of the tanks in like almost every category, except utility. But yeah, you need to survive the key to play tank in the key, I guess. So we're putting Pally in the mid category. Also, just going when you're just playing your class, like using free Word of Glories on yourself, quote unquote free, is not a good feeling. So we're putting in the mid, but honestly, they could easily be here too. For melees, most of these melees are just massively underplayed in beta. Most people, I just haven't seen many of them. The few times I do see them, they're not doing that high damage. Like, they're functional. You could probably complete the key with them, but compared to some of the DPS over here, like the quote unquote real DPS, damage is probably going to be a bit lower. Survival, I think I overestimated in previous weeks after playing with like an Assassination Rogue and a DK. Survival is not quite at that level of strength, so we're putting it in mid with the rest of the hunters. And Destrolock, I think, got massively over-nerfed, unfortunately. So we're putting them in mid. If you play Warlock, most of them are playing AF right now. Unknown, still haven't really seen a Priest Healer on beta for some reason. Not sure why. Maybe it's weak, maybe it's not, who knows. For needs buffs, Dev Evoker randomly caught like splash damage when they nerfed Scale Commander for, I think it was for Augmentation Evoker, but they nerfed Scale Commander. And I think Dev Evoker was playing Scale Commander, so they randomly caught splash damage, unfortunately, and got nerfed. Fire Mage, haven't seen any changes relating to Fire Mage, so I think they're still one of the weaker specs. Fortunately for mages, you've got two specs that are very strong, so you're always in the meta anyway. But yeah. Alright, so that's the tier list update. Thanks everyone for watching. Catch y'all next week or on stream. Peace out.